The most powerful telescope ever built can be aimed at the emptiest corner of the night sky and still miss most of what is genuinely there. Not because that part is too distant to reach, but because most of the universe gives off no light at all. Today, we'll follow what holds every galaxy together without ever once letting itself be seen, and the handful of people who learned to look at nothing and find a shape there. If this feels like your kind of place, subscribe. It helps the channel grow and reach more people. Let's begin. The most powerful telescope ever built is blind to most of the universe. Point the largest, sharpest telescope humanity has ever built at the darkest, emptiest patch of sky. Hold it there for days, gathering every faint trace of light that arrives, and it will still miss most of what is in front of it. The part it misses is not too far away to reach, and it is not too faint to register. It simply gives off no light at all, no glow, no reflection, nothing anywhere for a lens to gather. And most of the universe is made of exactly that. This is the quiet, almost unreasonable fact at the center of modern astronomy. We have built instruments that can catch the glow of galaxies whose light has been crossing space toward us for more than 13 billion years. We can read the temperature of a star from the far side of the galaxy, weigh a planet we will never visit, map the chemistry of a cloud we could never reach. And all of that reach, all of that patiently gathered light, shows us less than a fifth of the matter that is genuinely there. The rest does not refuse to be near and does not refuse to be bright. It refuses to be light at all. We have a name for it, and the name is almost an apology. Dark matter. But it is not dark the way a moonless field is dark. That darkness is only light withheld, waiting for the dawn to return it. This is something stranger. It is not waiting, and it will not brighten. A beam of starlight can pass directly through an enormous pool of it and emerge on the far side carrying no record at all that it passed through anything. And here is the part that turns the strangeness into something closer to vertigo. This unseen thing is not a faint contaminant out at the edges of the cosmos. It is the main event. Roughly 5 of every 6 grams of matter in the universe is this. And the bright matter, the kind that builds stars and oceans and bodies and this voice, is the rare exception. Everything every telescope has ever photographed in all of human history is the thin, glowing skin on something vastly larger that has never been photographed at all. So how could anyone possibly know it is there? That question is the whole journey ahead of us, and it is a strange one to be setting out on, because we are going to come to know something intimately without ever once seeing it. We will watch galaxies turn in a way that should fling their own stars loose, see light bend around what looks like empty space, and sit beside patient people who waited in the dark, under mountains, for decades, for a single touch that never came. Not one of them ever saw the thing. Every one of them learned its shape. For now, lie still. Feel the weight of the blanket, the temperature of the air, the slow pressure of your own breath. The room is calm. The night is ordinary, and nothing about either is going to change. But the emptiness you have always pictured between the stars, the simple, restful nothing of deep space, was never empty. It is the fullest thing there is. We only ever searched for it with the one instrument it was always going to slip past, light. It has been here the whole time. It is here now. It asked for nothing and told us nothing, and we are only lately, and only barely, beginning to learn how to listen for it. Fritz Zwicky weighed a swarm of galaxies, and the number came back wrong. In 1933, a Swiss astronomer with a difficult reputation and an unusually stubborn mind pointed his attention at a crowd of galaxies in the constellation Coma. His name was Fritz Zwicky. He was not gentle with colleagues, not patient with people he found unimaginative, which by his own account was most of them. He had a temper and a tongue and a habit of being years ahead in ways that did not endear him to the people he was ahead of. But he asked a question almost no one else had thought to ask of that distant swarm. How fast are these galaxies moving around each other, and how much mass would it take to keep them from flying apart? He measured the speeds. The galaxies in that cluster were not drifting gently. They were moving at tremendous rates relative to one another. Then he added up all the light, every glowing galaxy in the cluster, the only mass anyone knew how to count at the time, and asked whether that much matter could hold the swarm together by gravity alone against those speeds. It could not. Not nearly. The galaxies were racing far too fast for the visible mass to bind them. By the speeds alone, that cluster should have come undone long ago, scattered into the dark like sparks off a wheel. Yet there it was, intact, bound, ancient, plainly not in the process of flying apart. Something was holding it that he could not see. He estimated there had to be vastly more mass present than everything that shone, and he gave that missing component a name that translates roughly to dark matter. Then almost nothing happened. For 40 years. This is the part of the story we tend to skip, and it is worth staying with rather than hurrying past. He was not wrong, he was early. The science of his time had no way to hold the idea. No instruments aimed at confirming it. No theoretical frame ready to receive it. No appetite for a claim that quiet and that enormous from a man that abrasive. There were also reasonable doubts. The distance scale of the universe was poorly known then, and that uncertainty muddied the exact size of the discrepancy. So the result sat in the literature like a letter delivered to a house where no one was home. It was not refuted. It was simply not picked up. Zwicky kept working, kept arguing, kept being right about things in ways that did not make him friends. He proposed gravitational lensing as a tool decades before anyone could use it. He helped catalog supernovae before the field cared. He died before the world came back to that 1933 letter and read it properly. There is a particular loneliness in being correct too soon. It is not the loneliness of the misunderstood crank, who is at least wrong in an interesting way. It is quieter and harder than that. The loneliness of having seen something true and watched the world simply not be ready to need it yet. The cluster he measured is still out there tonight, still bound, still held by the thing he named and could not see. It never once required our belief to keep itself together. Galaxies spin fast enough to tear themselves apart, and don't. Take something on a string and swing it in a circle. The faster it goes, the harder it pulls outward. Spin it fast enough, and the string snaps, and the thing flies off into the dark, and no amount of wishing brings it back to the circle. A galaxy is a city of stars on invisible strings, and the string is gravity. The strength of that string depends on how much mass is pulling inward from within the orbit. Spin the stars too fast for the available mass, and the string is not strong enough. The outer stars should sail away on straight lines and never return, and the galaxy should slowly dissolve at its edges like a sandbar in a current. For most of the 20th century, we assumed galaxies obeyed a simple rule we already trusted from the solar system. The farther out you go, the slower things orbit. Mercury races around the sun in a matter of weeks. Neptune crawls, taking longer than any human lifetime to complete one circuit. The outer planets move slowly because almost all the sun's mass is concentrated at the center, and gravity weakens with distance. So out at the edge there is less pull, and the orbits are leisurely. A galaxy, we expected, would behave the same way. Stars near the bright, crowded core moving quickly. Stars at the lonely edge drifting slowly. The rotation curve falling away with distance, the way a thrown ball's arc falls back to the ground. When we finally measured the outer regions of spiral galaxies carefully, the faint outskirts, far past where the light thins to almost nothing, that is not what we found. The stars and gas at the edge were not slowing down. They were moving just as fast as material much closer in. The curve did not fall. It rose, then leveled, and then simply ran on flat, out into regions where there was hardly any visible matter left to provide the pull at all. The galaxy was turning less like a loose swarm and more like a record on a turntable, holding together far past where the light gave out. By the visible mass alone, those edge stars should long ago have been flung off into the void. There was not enough glowing material out there to keep them on their wide circles, and yet they held. Galaxy after galaxy after galaxy. Something far past the last bright star was still pulling. A great unseen reservoir of mass extending well beyond anything that shone. A halo of the invisible holding the visible inside it, like a hand cupped around a small flame. Every spiral galaxy we have looked at carefully tells the same story, with almost no exceptions and no convincing way to explain the exceptions away. The bright disk you can photograph is not the galaxy. It is the lit window of a far larger house, and the house is dark, and the house is most of what is there. The stars are not the structure that holds the structure up. They are the part of the structure that happened to catch fire, and we mistook the fire for the building. Vera Rubin sat in the dark and saw the shape of what wasn't there. For much of her early career, Vera Rubin chose problems other astronomers found unfashionable. It was, in part, a survival strategy. The crowded, prestigious questions came with crowded, prestigious rooms, and those rooms had not been built to make space for her. Quieter corners of the field had fewer people in them, and fewer people meant fewer doors held shut. So in the 1960s and 70s, she and her collaborator Kent Ford turned a sensitive new instrument towards something then considered unglamorous: the precise rotation of spiral galaxies. It was patient work, long nights at the telescope, galaxy after galaxy, measuring how fast the gas and stars orbited at different distances from the center. It was not the kind of work that announces itself while it is being done. It accumulates. The expectation was the falling curve, fast near the middle, slower toward the edge, the orderly solar system pattern everyone took for granted. What came back again and again was a line that refused to fall. It rose, it flattened, and then it simply ran on, level, out past the visible edge of the galaxy, as if the bright disk did not know it was supposed to thin out into nothing and let its outer stars slow down. The galaxies were behaving as though far more mass was present than the light could account for, arranged in a great enveloping reservoir reaching well beyond the glow. She did not announce a revolution. That was not her way. She reported what the data said plainly, galaxy after galaxy, until the sheer weight of the repetition became impossible to wave away. One unusual galaxy is an anomaly someone can dismiss over coffee. The next galaxy is a coincidence. By the time it is every galaxy you point the instrument at, it is no longer an anomaly. It is a law, and laws do not care how unfashionable the question was that found them. What she had measured, without ever seeing it, was the gravitational fingerprint of an enormous unseen mass wrapped around each of those bright spirals. She had drawn the outline of something by tracing only the things it moved, the way you might know a swimmer is in dark water not from the body, which you never see, but from the slow, widening rings on the surface, which you can read precisely. The rings are real. The body is real. You simply infer the second from the first, and you are right too. She was careful about the word discovery for the rest of her life, and that carefulness is part of what made the work trustworthy. She had not found the substance. She had found, beyond reasonable argument, the place where it had to be and roughly how much of it there had to be. There is a difference between those two things, and she respected the difference instead of erasing it for a better headline. The galaxies she measured are still turning tonight, still flat in their rotation, still held by the things she charted line by line and never once touched. We see the invisible by the light it bends on its way to us. Light likes to travel in straight lines. It is one of the most dependable facts in the universe. So dependable we built our whole intuition about seeing on it. But straight turns out to mean something subtler than we first believed. And the subtlety is how the invisible stopped being entirely invisible. Mass curves the space that light moves through. The light still takes the straightest available path. It simply has no choice but to follow the curve, the way a road that feels perfectly straight to the driver is in fact bending with the surface of the Earth the whole time. Put enough mass between you and a distant source of light, and the light arriving from behind it does not reach you in a clean line. It arcs. It smears. Sometimes it splits, so that a single galaxy far behind appears as 2 or 4, or is drawn out into a thin, bright ring wrapped around the mass in front of it. A circle of light bent entirely around an obstacle, like seeing the far shore curved around a stone in a stream. When astronomers look at a massive cluster of galaxies and see the light of more distant galaxies behind it bent into those arcs and rings, they can work backward with real precision. The exact amount and pattern of the bending tells you the exact amount and arrangement of the mass doing the bending. You do not have to guess. You measure the distortion, and the distortion gives you the mass map. And the mass map, again and again, comes back far heavier than everything that shines in that cluster, many times heavier, and arranged in a smooth, extended shape that the visible galaxies do not match. There is also a gentler version of the effect, where distant galaxies are not split into arcs, but only slightly stretched, all of them subtly aligned in a faint, shared distortion across a whole region of sky. Measure that quiet stretching across millions of background galaxies, and you can map the unseen mass of enormous volumes of the universe, weighing the dark by the faint lean it presses into the shapes of galaxies behind it. There is something quietly moving about this, and it is worth letting land. The substance refuses every direct question we ask it. It will not glow for our telescopes, will not warm our detectors, will not announce itself in any voice we built an instrument to hear. But it cannot stop being massive, and mass cannot stop curving space, and so the universe carries the news to us anyway, written in the light of galaxies that were never trying to tell us anything, light that left them long before our planet had a name, that bent around something on its way here and arrived carrying the proof folded into its path. We did not catch the thing. We were standing where the bent light landed, and we learned slowly to read what the bend was saying. In one collision, the matter we see and the matter we don't came apart. Most of the time, the visible and the invisible in a galaxy cluster sit together, layered in the same place, impossible to pull apart by eye. The unseen mass and the glowing matter overlap so completely that you cannot point to where one ends. Then there is a particular pair of clusters, very far away, that ran into each other at enormous speed. And in the wreck, for once, the two kinds of matter physically came apart and left separate tracks. When two clusters collide, their components behave very differently, and the difference is the whole point. The ordinary matter is mostly not in the stars at all. It is in vast, thin, superheated clouds of gas that fill the space between the galaxies and outweigh the stars themselves. When the clusters meet, gas meets gas. It drags, it shocks, it heats further and slows and piles up near the point of impact, snagged in the middle of the crash like cars in a pile-up that cannot pass through one another. The other component does not slow down. The unseen mass of each cluster sails almost straight through the collision, barely disturbed, the way two flocks of birds can fly through each other without a single feather touching. It does not shock. It does not heat. It does not pile up. It keeps going, carried by its own momentum, registering the other cluster only as a faint, distant gravitational tug. So after the crash, you are left with a strange double portrait. Trace the ordinary matter by the X-ray glow of its hot gas, and most of it sits stranded in the center, caught on the impact. Trace the total mass by how the whole region bends the light of galaxies far behind it, and most of the mass is not in the center at all. It has passed clean through and moved out ahead in two bulges on either side, cleanly separated from the glowing matter that got stuck. Sit with what that means, because it is rare. In that distant ruin, the universe accidentally performed an experiment we could never have built ourselves. It took a cluster of galaxies, pulled the seen and the unseen apart by smashing it into another cluster, and let us photograph where each kind of matter ended up. The bright stuff caught and held in the middle. The dark stuff walked through the catastrophe as if it were not there, because to it, almost nothing is there to walk through. This is one of the reasons the idea is so hard to set aside, and why the explanation that there is simply no dark matter struggles here in particular. It is not only that galaxies spin too fast, which a clever change to gravity might in principle address. It is that here, in this wreck, the mass and the light physically parted ways and went to different places, and a theory in which the mass simply is the light has to explain how the mass ended up somewhere the light is not. The collision does not argue with anyone. It just shows you where each thing went and lets you stand in front of it. The universe is built on a scaffold no telescope can photograph. If you could pull far enough back from our galaxy, past the local group, past the nearest great clusters, until individual galaxies became too small to resolve, and only their collective glow remained, you would notice the glow is not spread evenly through space. It is not a fog filling everything at one brightness. It is a web. Galaxies do not sit scattered at random, like sand thrown across a floor. They string together along immense filaments, bright threads far longer than our galaxy is wide, that meet at dense knots, where great clusters sit, and that border enormous, nearly empty rooms called voids, where there is almost nothing at all for distances the mind cannot hold. This is the cosmic web. At the largest scale we can map, it is the actual architecture of the universe, the single biggest pattern that exists, and a pattern, not a mess. But the galaxies are not the web. They are the dew caught on it. Run the early universe forward in a simulation with only ordinary matter, and you do not get this. You cannot. Ordinary matter, on its own, could not gather itself into structure quickly enough. For a long age, it was held nearly smooth by its entanglement with light. Every small lump it tried to form, pushed flat again by radiation pressure, like trying to build a sandcastle directly under a running tap. Left to itself, the visible universe would still be thin and shapeless, far emptier than the sky we actually see. To grow the web in the time the universe has actually had, you need something that could begin clumping much earlier and much harder. Something that ignored light entirely and answered only to gravity from the start. Add the dark matter, and the simulation comes alive in a way that matches the real sky. It pulls itself, under gravity, into filaments and knots and basins first, building the invisible scaffold during the long age when nothing visible could yet clump at all. Only afterward does ordinary matter, finally freed from the grip of radiation, drain downward into the structure already waiting for it. Gas pooling in the basins, cooling, igniting into the first stars, lighting up along the threads that were laid before there was any light to lay them by. So the shape you see when you map 1,000,000 galaxies is not a shape the galaxies made for themselves. It is a shape they fell into. The scaffold was raised first, in the dark, by the substance that does not shine, and the stars are tenants who moved into a building that was finished and standing long before they arrived to switch the lights on. We will never take a true photograph of that scaffold. There is no light coming off it to gather into an image, but we have mapped its outline anyway, by where the galaxies hang on it. The way you can map a spider's web at dawn, not by seeing the silk, which is nearly invisible, but by seeing every droplet of water caught along it, each one holding the hidden pattern up to the morning light. Most of our galaxy is a sphere of nothing you can name. When you picture the Milky Way, you almost certainly picture the disk, the flat spiral pinwheel, the bright band of stars and dust that arcs across a dark country sky, and that we have been drawing in one form or another for as long as we have drawn the sky at all. That picture is not wrong. It is just the small, visible heart of something far larger and almost entirely unseen, and the smallness is the part the picture leaves out. The disk of stars, for all its grandeur, is the minority report. Wrapped around it, far above and far below the thin plane you can see, reaching outward many times farther than the most distant bright star, is a vast, roughly spherical cloud, the halo. It does not glow. It has no clean edge you could draw with a confident line. It just thins and thins outward with no obvious place to stop. And it contains the great majority of the galaxy's mass, by a wide margin, in a form that has never once announced itself by light. The honest shape of the Milky Way, then, is not a pinwheel. It is a sphere of the invisible with a glowing coin sunk in the middle of it. We live partway out on the coin, and we named the entire structure after the coin, and drew it as the coin, because the coin is all our eyes were ever able to report back to us. The naming was not a mistake exactly. It was the only thing eyes could have done. The halo holds the spiral together. Without it, the disk's outer stars, the ones far from the crowded core, would not stay on their wide, slow circles, because there is nowhere near enough visible mass out there to keep them. The bright structure we love, and have charted for centuries and put on the covers of books, exists at all only because it sits cradled inside a far greater structure we cannot chart directly, and could photograph from no angle, in no wavelength. There is something to carry from this down into the quiet, and it does not need to be made into a lesson to be worth holding. The thing you can see is rarely the thing that is holding you up. The disk does not support itself. It rests inside the dark, the way the lit rooms of a house rest inside the unlit frame of the walls. The frame doing the work, the rooms getting the attention. You have always lived in the bright window of a much larger, much darker, much older house. It has never once stopped holding the window in place, and it has never once asked to be looked at for doing so. The window is where the warmth gathers. The wall is where the holding happens. For most of our history, we were only ever able to thank the warmth, and the wall did not seem to mind, because minding is also not a thing the dark does. Beneath a mountain, a tank of cold liquid has been waiting in total silence. Drive into a mountain. Go down a long tunnel, past the depth where the rock above finally stops the constant rain of cosmic particles that washes over the surface, into a chamber humans dug and built and sealed for one strange purpose, not to be quiet to the ear, but to be quiet to the most sensitive instruments our species has ever made. In chambers like this, around the world, sit tanks of ultra-cold, ultra-pure liquid, often xenon, chilled and shielded, and surrounded by rings of light detectors so delicate they can register a single faint flash from a single faint event. Every part of the apparatus, every choice of material, every layer of shielding exists to serve one verb: to wait. The hope is simple and almost unbearably patient. If dark matter is made of particles, and if those particles very rarely, almost never, collide with an ordinary atom, then once in a great while, one of them might clip a nucleus in that tank and set it recoiling, producing the tiniest possible flicker of light, a single soft event the detectors could just barely catch. To have any chance of seeing that flicker, you must first remove almost every other source of light and motion in the world. The cosmic particles, blocked by the mountain, the natural radioactivity of ordinary rock and metal, screened out by careful layers of the purest materials that can be made, even faint traces in the air, the dust, the walls. Then, having built a near-perfect stillness, you sit inside it, in the dark, under the stone, and you let the years pass. These experiments run for years. Some, in successive generations of larger and quieter tanks, have run for decades. The detector does not get bored. It does not look away. It holds the same patient attention across more time than most human projects survive, listening for a touch so faint it might happen in that whole volume a handful of times in a lifetime. Or never. Not once. No matter how long anyone is willing to wait. There is a kind of monastic discipline in this, and it is worth seeing clearly, rather than rushing past on the way to the result. We located the quietest places we could reach, hollowed out rooms of stillness inside mountains, filled them with cold, pure liquid, and then asked them to keep perfectly still and perfectly attentive for longer than some of the people who built them will go on working, to hold a vigil that may outlast its keepers. It is one of the quietest things our species has ever deliberately done. An expensive, decades-long, carefully engineered act of waiting in the dark for something that might tap once, very softly, and might not, and either way will not explain itself. The people who began that vigil understood, going in, that the most likely report after a lifetime of perfect attention was no report at all. And they built it anyway at that price, on those odds, because a question can be worth a silence that long, and they had decided this one was. After decades of listening, no one has caught a single particle. Here is where the story refuses to resolve, and it is important not to soften it, because the temptation to soften it is exactly what gets the subject wrong. We have the gravitational evidence, and it is overwhelming, and it points the same way from many fully independent directions. Spinning galaxies say it. Bent light says it. The parted matter in the Great Cluster Collision says it. The growth of the cosmic web says it. The faint frozen ripples in the oldest light in the sky say it, and they say it with numbers, and the numbers agree. By the weight of gravity, the case that there is far more matter than meets the eye is about as strong as cases in physical science ever get. This is not a fringe idea clinging on. It is one of the best supported claims we have about the universe at large. And yet, after all the tanks under all the mountains, after detectors growing larger and colder and quieter and more sensitive year after year, decade after decade, no one has unambiguously caught a single particle of the stuff. Not one confirmed touch that the world agrees was real. Every so often a hint appears in some experiment's data, and the field tenses, and then the hint fades, or fails to repeat, or turns out to have a duller explanation, and the silence closes back over it. The flicker we built those rooms to see has not clearly come. This is the honest center of the subject, and it deserves to be stated plainly, with no comforting frame built around it to make it easier to carry. We are nearly certain it is there, by everything it moves. We have no confirmed idea what it is by everything it has so far refused to touch. The two facts sit side by side and do not reconcile, and they have not reconciled for a long time, and the people whose entire working lives are spent on this question live inside that gap without flinching, building the next tank, lowering the next threshold, asking the universe the same question in a slightly clearer voice, and receiving so far the same patient silence in reply. They do not treat that silence as a defeat exactly, and they do not treat it as encouragement either. They treat it as the answer the question has given so far, and they return the next morning and ask it again more carefully with a quieter instrument, because that returning is what the question is and has always been. It would be easy to end this somewhere kinder. There is nowhere kinder that is also true. The strength of the evidence and the depth of the ignorance are not in tension with each other. They are simply both fully true at the same time, and a person can learn to hold both at once without needing either one of them to give way first. We still don't know. And tonight, that's where we'll leave it. We have names for it, and the names are confessions. A WIMP, an axion, a sterile neutrino, a primordial black hole. These are some of the leading candidates, the proposed identities for the thing in the halo, the slots into which an answer might one day fit. Listen to them for a moment, not as physics, but as language, because the language is telling you something the equations are too polite to say. A weakly interacting massive particle is a description so bare it is almost a shrug. It has mass. It barely touches anything. We have not found it, and the name is just those three facts placed in a row. The axion was named, half in jest, after a brand of laundry detergent, because it was meant to clean up a separate, unrelated problem in physics, and the joke stuck. A sterile neutrino is named for what it doesn't do. These are not the names you give something you have met and measured and come to know. They are the names you give an outline, placeholders set carefully in the spot where a real answer should eventually go. This is worth noticing because the situation it describes is genuinely unusual in science. It is rare to hold evidence this strong for the existence of something while holding language this provisional for what that something is. We can tell you, with real confidence and real numbers, how much of it there is, where it pools, how it shaped the early universe, how it bends light around a distant cluster, how it grew the cosmic web. We cannot tell you whether it is one kind of thing or a whole family of things, whether it is heavy or nearly weightless, whether it was forged in the first fraction of the first second or assembled gradually afterward, whether it can ever, under any conditions, touch itself. Every candidate on the list is a careful, serious, testable guess wearing a technical coat, and the experiments are designed precisely to take the coats off one by one, ruling them out, narrowing the field, even when the year's result is, again, that the thing is not what this particular guess proposed. There is no comfort to add here, and it would be a small dishonesty to invent one. A field that has measured something this precisely while naming it this loosely is not a confused field. It is a field being unusually honest about the exact size and shape of its own ignorance. The names are not knowledge. They are bookmarks pressed into a book we have not finished reading, holding our place at the page where the universe stopped explaining itself and let us sit there, holding the book open in the dark. And the strange dignity of the field is that it keeps the bookmarks honest. It does not quietly promote a guess to an answer because the waiting has gone on too long. A bookmark stays a bookmark until the page is actually read, however many years that takes, however tired the hand holding the book becomes. It shares every room with light, and the two never speak. Two things can occupy the same space and have no way whatsoever to notice each other. We rarely stop to think about this, because almost everything we have ever experienced does interact with almost everything else. That mutual noticing is, in fact, the entire reason we are able to experience anything at all. Light is how the universe mostly talks to itself and to us. Stars speak in light. Gas glows. Dust reddens and dims. Planets and moons reflect. Very nearly everything we know about everything beyond our own small Earth arrived as light of one kind or another, gathered by an eye, a lens, a mirror, a dish, decoded into temperature, motion, composition, distance, age. Light is the messenger that almost nothing in the cosmos refuses to send or receive. It is the common tongue of matter. Dark matter refuses it completely. It does not give off light. It does not absorb light. It does not scatter, tint, slow, or redden it. A beam of starlight can pass straight through an enormously dense pool of the stuff and emerge on the far side entirely unmarked, carrying no record at all that it passed through anything, except, very gently and only from a distance, the faint curve the mass pressed into its path through space itself. Up close, in passing, nothing. No exchange. No trace. Picture it honestly. The halo of our galaxy and the light of every star in the disk have shared the same enormous volume of space for billions of years, fully intertwined through all that time, the starlight crossing and recrossing the dark threaded everywhere through the starlight, and in all those billions of years they have never once exchanged a single word. The light does not know the halo is there. The halo does not register that the light is passing through it. They are not enemies. Enmity requires acknowledgement. They are not even strangers, because strangers at least share a world and a language and the bare possibility of contact. They are two complete presences occupying one place on terms that make any conversation impossible forever by construction. We tend to assume, almost without examining it, that to be near something is to affect it. That proximity is a kind of relationship. Most of the universe, by mass, quietly and permanently disproves that assumption. The single most abundant substance there is keeps perfect, total, eternal company with light, and has never, in all the time there has been time, given any sign of having noticed that light was ever there at all. Two presences, one place, no contact, no record, no end to it. The starlight that reaches your eye tonight has crossed an ocean of the other thing on its way here, and arrived knowing nothing of the crossing, the way a sound can pass clean through a window that never hears it. Nearness, here, buys nothing. The two have been as near as two things can be for longer than there have been eyes, and the nearness has never once become acquaintance. The Milky Way drifts inside an invisible cocoon older than its stars. Step the timeline back. Before the spiral arms, before the sun was anything more than a possibility in a cloud, before the disk had wound itself into the shape we draw and name the galaxy by, there was the halo. The order of events matters here, and it is the reverse of the order our intuition would guess. The current understanding runs roughly like this. The dark matter, answering only to gravity and entirely deaf to the light that was holding ordinary matter smooth and featureless, began drawing itself together earlier than anything visible was able to. It built deep gravitational basins, wide, quiet wells in the fabric of space, regions where the geometry leaned inward and anything that fell in would tend to stay. These wells deepened and merged across a long age in which there was, as yet, nothing in them bright enough to see. Only afterward did ordinary gas, finally released from its long entanglement with radiation, begin to fall inward and pool at the bottoms of those wells, growing dense enough and cold enough to finally ignite the first stars. So the cocoon came first. The galaxy formed inside something that was already there and already old. The stars did not assemble the structure, and then, later, acquire a halo around themselves as an afterthought. They condensed at the bottom of a halo that had been gathering and deepening for a long time before there was anything in it to light. We are, all of us, the late arrivals to our own address. The sun is a recent resident of a structure far older than itself, and we are recent residents of the sun. The Milky Way's bright disk is a relatively young thing nested in an ancient invisible frame. The way a single warm, lit room can sit inside the cold stone shell of a house that stood, dark and empty and entirely itself, for years before anyone moved in, set down their things, and lit the first fire in it. There is no need to make this comforting, and trying to would only flatten it. It is simply the order of things, stated honestly. The unseen was here first. It dug the basin. The light came afterward and settled at the bottom of the basin, where the light has remained ever since, calling that basin home, drawing the basin on its maps, naming the basin after itself, and only lately, and only barely, learning that the basin was there before it and is far larger than the part it occupies. The fire does not warm the basin. The basin does not need the fire. They are not company for each other in any way the fire would recognize as company. The fire simply burns where the deepest part of the well happened to be, and calls that low place the center of everything, because from inside a fire, every direction looks like the edge. The basin was never warmed by being lived in, and it kept its shape regardless, the way a valley keeps its shape whether or not a river has yet found the bottom of it. The first galaxies could not have formed without it. There is a clock problem in the early universe, and dark matter is the answer most often given to it. Not because it is convenient, but because almost nothing else makes the clock work. After the beginning, ordinary matter was bound up tightly with radiation in a hot, bright, nearly uniform fog. For a long stretch of cosmic time, hundreds of thousands of years, that ordinary matter simply could not clump. Every time gravity began to gather it into a denser knot, the immense pressure of all that trapped light pushed the knot smooth again, the way it is impossible to build a stable pile of sand directly beneath a running tap. So ordinary matter stayed almost evenly spread, almost featureless, smoothed flat again and again for that entire long age. If that were the whole story, structure would have arrived far too late. The universe would not have had nearly enough time to grow galaxies as early and as developed as we now actually observe them to be. The bright cosmos would still be a thin, sluggish thing only beginning to assemble, and the deep sky would be far emptier than the deep sky we see when we point our best telescopes into the dark and wait. But dark matter was never bound to the light. It felt no pressure from radiation, because radiation has no grip on something that does not interact with it. So while ordinary matter was being held smooth and forbidden to gather, the dark matter was already free to do the one thing it does: fall together under gravity. It built the seeds of structure, the deepening wells, the first gravitational scaffolding, during the very age when everything visible was prevented from clumping at all. By the time ordinary matter was finally freed from the light, the gravitational landscape was no longer flat. It was already carved into hills and valleys. The gas did not have to start its work from a smooth nothing. It poured into valleys that the dark had spent that whole silent age patiently digging. So the galaxies got a head start they did not earn and could not have managed on their own. The scaffolding was raised during the long age when nothing was yet permitted to shine. Every early galaxy is, in a real sense, evidence of work done in total darkness before the lights were ever switched on. Assembled faster than ordinary matter alone ever could have, because the ground had already been shaped, ahead of time, by something that never needed to wait for the fog to clear, and never needed light to do its work. This is the quiet inversion at the heart of how structure began. The thing that built the first room was the thing that could not be lit. The lighting came after, and only because there was by then a room already there to light. Every galaxy that has ever shone is, in that sense, a late tenant of a structure it did not raise and could not have raised alone. James Webb found galaxies that look too grown for how young the universe was. This is the part of the title that pulls people in, so let us be honest about exactly how much it does and does not say, because the honest version is more interesting than the slogan, not less. The James Webb telescope was built, in part, to look as far back as light allows, to catch the faint, stretched light of galaxies whose glow has been traveling toward us for almost the entire age of the universe, and so to see those galaxies not as they are now, but as they were when the cosmos itself was very young. When it began sending those early images home, some of what it found was unexpected. A number of galaxies from that very early era looked larger, brighter, more assembled, more grown up than the simplest predictions had suggested anything should be that soon after the beginning. They looked, to put it plainly, further along than the schedule said. The headlines did what headlines do. Cosmology overturned. Everything we knew is wrong. It is worth being calmer than that. And the calm is not a hedge. It is where the real interest is. Nothing about those early galaxies removed the need for dark matter. If anything, the puzzle deepens its relevance. The whole role dark matter plays in the story is to make early structure possible by preparing the gravitational ground far in advance. And a universe that turns out to have built its first galaxies even faster than expected is a universe leaning even harder on something that lets structure start early. The strain, where there genuinely is strain, is in the finer details. How efficiently those first galaxies converted gas into stars, how bright they were physically able to become that quickly, where exactly our models of the first few 100 million years were too smooth, too tidy, too confident. So here is the honest version, the one worth carrying into the dark instead of the slogan. The telescope did not prove the universe has no hidden scaffold. It looked at the earliest construction site we have ever managed to see and found the building going up faster than our drawings predicted. That is not an answer. It is a sharper question, asked from much closer to the beginning than we had ever before been able to stand. The unseen frame is still there in every serious version of the story. We simply saw the work proceeding ahead of schedule, and now we have to redraw the plans, which is what discovery usually looks like, before anyone decides what it meant. The slogan says a wall fell down. The truth is that a measurement came back early, and a model that had been a little too neat now has to become less neat, which is not a wall falling but a window opening. And the unseen scaffold is still standing on the other side of it, exactly where every honest version of the story has always placed it. A current of unseen matter is blowing through the solar system right now. The sun is not sitting still, and neither therefore are you. It is carrying its whole family of planets in a long, fast orbit around the center of the Milky Way. A circuit so large that a single lap takes something on the order of 200 million years, and our entire species, every person who has ever lived, has not been here long enough to watch the sun complete even a small fraction of one. As we travel that orbit, we move through the galaxy's dark halo. And because the halo as a whole is not spinning along neatly with the disk the way the disk spins with itself, the effect, from our moving point of view, is a wind. Not a wind of air, nothing your skin could ever register. A wind of dark matter. A steady, directional flow of unseen particles streaming past the moving solar system. The way perfectly still fog becomes a draft against your face the instant you start to walk through it. The fog is not moving. You are. The wind is the relationship between you and something vast that is, itself, going nowhere in particular. You cannot feel this wind. Nothing built by evolution can, because the particles do not push on the kinds of things that pushing would warn. They pass through skin and bone and the careful machinery of every sense without the faintest exchange. But the wind has a direction, and, more strangely, it has a season. As the Earth swings around the Sun across a year, for part of that year our orbital motion adds to the Sun's motion through the halo, and for the other part it subtracts from it. So the dark matter wind should blow very slightly harder against us in one part of the year and very slightly softer about 6 months later. A faint annual breathing, in and then out, almost imperceptible, that some underground experiments have spent years trying to detect as a tiny yearly rise and fall in the rate of their flickers. It is a strange thing to hold in your mind as you lie still in a still room. You are not still. The room is not still. The bed is sailing through a current you will never feel, angled a little into the wind in one season and a little out of it half a year later. The whole planet leaning first one way and then the other against a flow that does not know we are here, has never known, and does not slow down or change course for us by any amount we could ever measure. It simply blows, as it blew before the Earth, as it will blow after. There is no shelter from it, and no need of shelter, because it does not strike anything it could damage. It is the only wind there is that you could walk into forever, in any direction, and never once feel arrive. And it has been arriving the whole time, against the moving planet, all night, every night, soft past every measure of soft. We are downstream of a flow that does not know our name. Stay with that wind a moment longer, because there is something inside it worth keeping when the rest of the night's facts have settled. A current implies a direction, and a direction implies an upstream. Somewhere there is a way the dark matter is mostly coming from, as the sun plows steadily forward through the halo on its enormous orbit, a faint cosmic upstream, the way a swimmer pushing across a calm lake feels the water arriving from ahead, even though the lake itself is not flowing anywhere. We are not floating in still water. We are facing, very gently and entirely without sensation, into something. This flow has no source the way a river has a spring you could walk to. It is simply the relative motion between us and the vast, slow, nearly motionless halo. And it has been blowing against this solar system since long before there was a solar system here to receive it, since the halo first gathered itself, while the sun was still only gas waiting to become a star. Whatever lived here, at any point in the long history of this place, received that wind. Whatever lives here now receives it. It does not blow harder for the careful and spare the careless. It does not register that we have, lately, learned its name, or that we have hollowed out mountains and filled them with cold, pure liquid in the hope of feeling a single one of its particles brush an atom. It arrives exactly as it would arrive at an empty solar system with no one in it at all, constant, indifferent, unaltered by being known. There is no lesson being offered here, and it would be dishonest to dress one up and hand it to you in the dark. The flow is not a message. It does not mean anything by passing through you, because it is not the kind of thing that means. That, perhaps, is the part actually worth carrying down toward sleep. Not that the cosmos is whispering something to you through the unseen matter, but that something this vast can be this close, this constant, and this entirely uninterested. And the night goes on being calm anyway. The calm does not depend on being noticed back. You do not need to matter to the flow in order to be carried gently inside it. You only have to be here, in the water, which you are, and have been, and will be for as long as here is here. The river of it does not bend around you the way water bends around a stone, because to the river you are not even a stone. You are more river than stone, more space than substance, the way everything is. It does not part for you, it goes through. And going through, it has never once disturbed a single night's rest of a single sleeping thing. Of all the vast forces the universe contains, this is the one that has never woken anyone and never will. Some galaxies are almost nothing but the dark. Not all galaxies wear their light the same way, and a few wear almost none. There are small, dim, sparse galaxies scattered near our own, the dwarf galaxies, and a handful of them carry the entire argument about dark matter to its sharpest and cleanest point. A few of these dwarfs are almost embarrassingly faint. A loose scattering of old stars, very little gas, nothing dramatic to photograph, the kind of object easy to miss entirely against the background of the sky. By their light alone, they should barely have the mass to stay bound together at all. An object that small and that thinly populated should, by everything visible in it, drift apart under the smallest disturbance. But measure how their few stars actually move, how fast they orbit the dwarf center, how much speed the system has to contain, and the speeds come back far too high for the visible material to explain. To keep those stars from wandering off into the dark, there must be vastly more mass present than anything shining there. In some of these dwarfs, the unseen mass outweighs the stars not slightly but enormously, by tens, by hundreds, by even more in the most extreme and most studied cases. These objects are, to a first approximation, halos with the faintest dusting of stars sprinkled across them. The light is almost an afterthought, almost an accident of how little gas managed to fall in and ignite. If you could somehow perceive mass directly instead of brightness, these would not look like wisps about to blow away. They would look like substantial, rounded, gravitationally serious bodies that happen to have caught only a few 100,000 stars, the way a wide, deep, dark pond might hold only a few pale leaves floating on its surface, and a creature that could see only the leaves would badly underestimate the pond. They are, for exactly that reason, among the cleanest laboratories in the whole sky for studying the dark, precisely because there is so little light in them to confuse the measurement. Almost nothing there is shining brightly enough to muddy the reading of the motion. They are very nearly pure structure, nearly pure scaffold, with barely enough light hung on the frame to see the frame by. Small, quiet, unremarkable-looking objects that are, by mass, almost entirely the one thing we cannot see, sitting close enough to our own galaxy to be read carefully, again and again, by anyone patient enough to look. There is a strange honesty to a galaxy like that. It does not flatter its few stars by surrounding them with light. It just holds them, with almost nothing to show for the holding, in a grip we can measure precisely and see not at all. A whole-bound world that is mostly the part of itself it cannot display. We tend to trust what a thing shows us about how large it is. These small galaxies are a quiet correction to that habit, sitting near enough to keep correcting it. It passes through itself the way it passes through everything. We have said dark matter sails through ordinary matter, through stone, through the cold tanks of xenon, through the long bones of your legs. There is a further strangeness, less often spoken aloud, that deserves a moment standing entirely on its own. By everything we can currently tell, dark matter passes through itself too. When the dark halos of two galaxies meet and begin to merge, the dark matter does not collide with itself the way gas collides with gas. It does not heat. It does not shock. It does not slam into a dense pancake at the point of contact and pile up there. The two halos move through each other, slowed only gradually by the patient grip of their mutual gravity over a very long time. Not by anything we would recognize as impact, not by any crash, not by any front where one thing refuses to share space with another. This is part of why, in the great cluster collision, the unseen mass walked clean through the wreck without stopping. It does that with everything. It also apparently does that with itself. Try to picture a substance that cannot run into anything, including more of itself. Two clouds of it, each the size of a galaxy's halo, can occupy the very same region of space at the same time, and then emerge on the other side, each one almost entirely undisturbed, having registered the other only as a faint, distant gravitational lean. There is no jam. There is no friction. There is no pile-up anywhere because pile-ups require things to refuse to be where other things already are, and this substance appears to carry almost no such refusal in it at all. The word occupied, which governs so much of how ordinary matter behaves, barely seems to apply. We have no everyday experience that prepares us for this, and it would be a small dishonesty to manufacture one that fits comfortably. Everything we have ever picked up, leaned on, or bumped into resists being where something else is. That resistance is most of what the word solid means, most of what the word touch means, most of the reason the world feels like a world rather than a haze. The dominant matter in the universe does not have that resistance. Whether there is some extremely faint exception, whether, under conditions we have not yet found or built, it bumps itself ever so slightly, is a real open question, and experiments and simulations are still chasing the answer, because the answer would tell us something about what the stuff actually is. For now, the honest picture is a substance with almost no sense of here and not there, moving through the cosmos and through its own kind. the way weather moves through weather, present, vast, and almost wholly without collision. It is hard to grieve for and hard to fear, this substance, partly because it never refuses anything, and so never threatens anything. It does not push back. It is the one thing in the universe that has nothing to defend, because it occupies no place firmly enough to be displaced from it. Zwicky was right for 40 years before anyone agreed, and it cost him. Return to the man from the second segment, because the human shape of this story is not finished, and the part that remains is not the comfortable part. Fritz Zwicky did not soften with vindication, because vindication did not arrive in his lifetime in any form he could actually hold. He spent decades being difficult and being correct. Two qualities the world rarely forgives in the same person at the same time. He had a famous, cutting insult of his own coinage for people he judged unimaginative, and he used it freely on colleagues in print across a long career. He was, by most accounts, genuinely hard to be around. He was also, on this one enormous question among many, simply right. Right early, right alone, and right in a way that required the rest of the field decades to catch up to. It is tempting to round all of this into a tidy moral, the misunderstood genius, justice arriving in the final act, the world admitting at last that it should have listened. Resist that ending, because it is not what happened to him. The final act did not arrive for him. The great convergence, rotating galaxies, bent light, the parted matter in the distant wreck, the frozen ripples in the oldest light, assembled itself into an unavoidable consensus after he was gone from it. He did not get to stand in the room while the field turned around and saw what he had seen in 1933. He got the long decades of being passed over, and then he got nothing further, and then the rest of us got the answer he had handed over and been ignored for. There is a hard thing here, and wrapping it in comfort would be a way of not saying it. Being right is not always returned to you. The universe does not owe its early readers the experience of being believed within their own lives. Zwicky read that cluster correctly when much of the world was busy elsewhere, and the cluster did not care that he had read it, and the field did not listen in time, and time itself did not rearrange its order to grant him the moment he had earned. There are people in every generation of this work who carry a true thing for years through a room that is not yet able to receive it. Some of them are there when the room finally turns. Some are not. The galaxies he weighed are still bound tonight by the thing he named and never saw. He never got to watch them prove him right. They are held all the same, and they were always going to be, with him or without him in the room. That is the part with no consolation folded into it, and it is better said than smoothed. The cluster did not wait for him to be believed. The truth he found did not depend on his being thanked for finding it. Some discoveries arrive carrying their own reward, and some arrive carrying only themselves, and the universe does not appear to keep track of which kind it hands to whom. The dark decides what the universe will look like forever. Run the cosmos forward instead of back. Let the clock keep going. Far past tonight, past the death of the sun, past the slow exhaustion of star formation, into an age when the bright things are mostly cinders and the sky to any eye has gone almost entirely dark. Through all of that, the scaffold remains. Dark matter does not burn out, because it never burned in the first place. It does not run down the way a star runs down, because it does not run on anything. There is no fuel in it to spend, no fire in it to gout out and gutter. The great filaments and knots and basins of the cosmic web, sculpted in the early dark before the first light, persist long after the galaxies caught in them have dimmed toward nothing. Whatever the universe becomes across that immense future, it becomes within the frame the dark already built and is still holding. The structure does not retire when the lights go out. In that sense, the unseen has, of everything that exists, the longest say. Stars are episodes, brilliant, brief, and finite. Galaxies, for all their grandeur, are something closer to weather inside the structure. Patterns that form, evolve, collide, and eventually fade within a frame they did not make. The structure itself, the invisible architecture, the dark scaffold, is the part with the longest tenure by far. The slow bones lying under everything bright and everything brief. The luminous era, the only era anyone has ever been awake inside of, is a phase the scaffold passes through, not the thing the scaffold is. It would be easy to make this either bleak or consoling, and the truthful response is that it is neither. It is simply long, longer than the words long time can really carry, and it does not bend toward either despair or comfort because it was never arranged for us to read it that way. The thing shaping the deep future of everything is the thing we cannot see, cannot catch, and cannot yet name. It was here before the first star found its first light. It will still be here, holding its shape in the dark, after the last star has cooled past glowing. The bright era, the era with stars in it, the only era with anything in it awake enough to wonder about any of this, is the brief, warm middle of something whose beginning and whose end both belong entirely to the dark. You are listening from inside the warm middle. That is not a small place to have been set down. It is only, against the scale of the scaffold, a brief one. The scaffold does not know it is brief, because the scaffold does not know anything. Briefness is a thing only the lit part can notice, and noticing it is one of the few things the lit part can do that the long dark frame around it never will. To be the part that can tell it is brief is most of what it means to be awake at all. The missing mass is not hiding stars or dead suns. Before anyone accepts something genuinely exotic, honesty requires ruling out the dull explanations, and for a long time, serious people tried very hard to, exactly as they should have. Maybe the reasoning went, the missing mass is just ordinary matter we cannot see well enough. Faint, failed stars too dim to register from this far away. Cold, dark clouds that emit no light. Drifting rogue planets with no sun to light them. The burnt-out husks of dead stars, gone cold and black. Even perhaps a hidden population of small black holes formed in the early universe. Things made of exactly the same atoms as everything else. Protons and neutrons and electrons, simply not arranged in anything that shines. No new physics required at all. The universe would just be a hoarder, keeping a great deal of perfectly ordinary mass in unlit forms where our telescopes could not count it. That explanation was taken seriously, pursued, and then steadily cornered from several directions at once. Dedicated searches looked for the brief, characteristic brightening that happens when a dark, compact object drifts almost exactly in front of a distant star, and its gravity momentarily focuses the star's light toward us. And they did not find anywhere near enough of those events to account for the missing mass with such objects. Independently, two completely different lines of evidence put a hard ceiling on how much ordinary matter the universe is allowed to contain in total, lit or unlit, glowing or cold or collapsed, the detailed pattern frozen into the oldest light in the sky, and the precise recipe of the lightest chemical elements forged in the universe's first few minutes. Both point to the same total budget of ordinary matter. That total is far, far too small to be the dark matter. There simply are not enough atoms in the entire universe, in any form whatsoever, to be the answer. So the boring solution was not dismissed out of taste or appetite for the dramatic. It was measured carefully from multiple independent directions and found badly short by a wide and well-determined margin. Whatever the great unseen mass is, it is, by the strongest evidence we have, not made of the ordinary stuff at all. Not dim stars, not cold gas, not nearly enough small black holes. It is something else, something not built from atoms. We did not choose the strange answer because it was thrilling or because it would make better headlines. We arrived at it the slow way, by eliminating the familiar answers one after another with real measurements, until the strangeness was simply what was left standing in the room. That is worth remembering whenever the idea sounds too exotic to trust. It was not the first thing reached for. It was the last thing standing after the ordinary explanations were measured, fairly and at length, and found too small, which is a much harder thing to argue with than a guess that was exciting from the start. Some physicists suspect there is no dark matter, only gravity behaving differently. Honesty requires giving the descent its real weight here, not a token line on the way past, because the question it raises is genuinely unsettled and the people raising it are not fools. The entire case for dark matter rests on one assumption we have never directly tested at the scale of a galaxy: that gravity behaves out there, in the faint outskirts, exactly the way it behaves here, where we first measured it and where it has never let us down. What if it does not? What if, at the extremely low accelerations found far out in the dim edges of galaxies, accelerations far gentler than anything in the solar system where our law was calibrated, gravity is subtly stronger than our equations predict? Then the galaxies would not be spinning too fast for their mass at all. There would be nothing unseen out there. Our law of gravity would simply be incomplete, extrapolated confidently into a regime it was never checked in, and failing there quietly in the dark, exactly where we cannot easily go to look. This idea has a real history and serious people behind it, and dismissing it cheaply would be a way of misunderstanding the whole subject. In its original form, it was strikingly successful at predicting the detailed rotation of a great many individual galaxies, using nothing but their visible matter and one new constant, a success that does not evaporate merely because it is inconvenient to the majority view, and that any honest account has to keep on the table. Where it has long struggled is at the largest scales and the earliest times, the parted matter in the Great Cluster Collision, where mass and light went to different places, the precise pattern of ripples in the oldest light in the sky, which the dark matter picture fits remarkably well with very few free choices, the overall growth of the cosmic web. The mainstream conclusion is that modified gravity explains some galaxy-scale facts elegantly and the large-scale facts poorly, while dark matter explains the large scales well, and that the overall weight of evidence therefore rests with the unseen mass. But mainstream is not the same word as settled, and the people on the other side of it are doing real physics, not crankery. We will not pretend this question is closed, because pretending would be the actual error. It is possible, not likely by the current weight of evidence, but genuinely possible, that there is no dark substance anywhere at all, and that what we have actually been discovering for 90 years is the far edge of our own law of gravity, the place where the rule we trust more than almost any other begins, very gently, very quietly, to come apart. We do not yet know which of those universes we are living in. Both possibilities are still standing in the room. One of them is wrong, and the honest thing to say tonight is that we cannot yet say which. That is not a small admission, and it is not a failure either. It is simply the true edge of what is known, said plainly, with the lights left on around it so that the next person can see where to start. The halo is older than the disk that lives inside it. There is a way of reading a galaxy's history in the company its stars keep, and what it reads out points to an order of events worth lying still with for a moment. The oldest stars of the Milky Way are not, for the most part, in the bright, flat disk where the sun lives. They are out in the surrounding sphere, the halo region, and they move very differently from the stars of the disk. They do not circle calmly in a single plane. They travel on long, steep, plunging, looping paths that cut up through the galaxy and back down through it, paths that ignore the flat pinwheel entirely. They are ancient stars, pour in the heavier chemical elements that later generations of stars are enriched with, survivors from very early in the galaxy's history. And they orbit through the great unseen halo because they were already there, in some early form, before the disk had ever settled into its smooth spin. So the structure assembled from the outside inward and from the old to the young. First the deep invisible basin dug in the dark, then the earliest stars condensing within it on those wild, looping, plane-ignoring paths, stars that still remember, in the shape of their orbits, a time before there was a disk to belong to. Only later did gas settle, cool, lose its disorder, and flatten into the rotating disk where, much later still, the sun would be born, where the spiral arms we photograph would slowly wind themselves up out of the smooth turning of the whole. The disk, the part we name the galaxy by, the part on every drawing, the part that means Milky Way to almost everyone who has ever looked up, is the youngest layer of the thing. It is the most recent room added to a structure whose oldest stars are still out beyond it, in the dark, on the old plunging paths, moving through the basin that was there before any of them caught fire. The pinwheel is not the foundation. It is the latest renovation, lit, spinning, beautiful and recent, set down inside a frame that was already ancient and already mostly invisible when the very first of its stars began to burn. We live in the new wing of a very old, very dark house, and we keep mistaking the new wing for the house. The old stars out in the halo still move the way the early dark moved them, on paths that remember a galaxy without a disk. They are, in a sense, the house's memory of itself before the renovation, kept not in records but in motion, looping quietly through the basin tonight exactly as they have since before there was a flat, bright place to call home. They are older than the address they share with us, and they keep no record of having minded the renovation that arrived around them. To trace one of those old looping paths is to read in a single faint star the order in which our home was made. The dark first, the wandering stars next, the bright, flat present last of all. Shredded galaxies trace the invisible like a spoon's track through cream. When a small galaxy wanders too close to a large one, it does not survive the encounter whole. The big galaxy's gravity pulls noticeably harder on the near side of the small one than on its far side, and that difference, small at any instant, relentless over a very long time, stretches the small galaxy out. It is drawn into a long, thin ribbon of stars, a stream, pulled out and wound around the larger galaxy like a slow current spiraling around a drain over hundreds of millions of years. The Milky Way wears several of these, pale, faint arcs of stars, the unwound remains of smaller galaxies and star clusters our galaxy has been quietly taking apart over an enormous span of time, draped across the sky in great curving lines that you would never see by eye, but that careful surveys can trace, star by star, all the way around. Here is why this matters for the unseen, and it is one of the more elegant ways we read the dark. Those streams are not pulled apart and arranged by the visible disk alone. They thread out through the great dark halo, and the precise path each stream takes, exactly how it bends, where it wobbles, where it thickens, and where it thins out to almost nothing, is shaped by the unseen mass it is moving through. The shape of the stream is, in effect, a careful reading of the shape of the dark around it, and it can be read finely. If the halo is not perfectly smooth, if there are lumps in it, denser knots of unseen matter drifting through, then a stream that passes close to one of those lumps should show a faint kink, a small disturbance, a place where the line of stars was nudged off true by something there is no light to see. Astronomers hunt for exactly those kinks, because each one is a fingerprint pressed into a line of stars by a hand we cannot otherwise detect. So the streams are read the way you might read the surface of a still, dark river to find the rocks resting on its bed. You never see the rock itself. You see the water bend and dimple and braid around it, and from the bending you infer, accurately, the shape and place of the thing underneath. The shredded galaxies are doing precisely that for us, across the entire sky at once. Long, pale, slowly stirred curves of ruined cities, dissolving into the dark, drawing for us in faint starlight the contours of a thing that has refused, in every other way we have asked, to be drawn directly. Each shredded galaxy, in being taken apart, becomes a kind of instrument it never agreed to be. Its destruction is also its last and clearest message. Here is the shape of the dark I fell through, written in the only ink I had left, which was my own scattering. The oldest light in the sky carries the fingerprint of the unseen. There is a glow that fills the entire sky in every direction you could ever point, far too faint and far too long-waved for any eye to register, but completely unmistakable to the right instrument. It is the oldest light there is, released when the young universe finally cooled enough to turn from an opaque fog into something transparent, and traveling unbroken and undisturbed across all of time since to arrive here now faintly from everywhere at once. That glow is not perfectly smooth. Across the sky it is very faintly mottled, hotter and cooler by the tiniest fractions of a degree in a fine pattern of patches and ripples. Those ripples are, in the most literal possible sense, the universe's baby photograph. A frozen snapshot of exactly how matter was distributed at the instant that light was set free. An image of the precise seeds from which every galaxy, every cluster, every filament of the cosmic web would later grow. Nothing else we have is a more direct picture of the beginning of structure. And the pattern only makes sense, only fits the numbers, when the unseen matter is included in the recipe. The exact sizes of those hot and cold patches, the precise way the ripples are spaced across the sky, the relative loudness of the large ripples against the smaller ones. All of it depends on a tug-of-war that played out in the hot early fog, between gravity pulling matter together and the pressure of trapped light pushing it back apart. Ordinary matter felt both of those forces, and so it rang like a struck bell at certain scales. Dark matter felt only gravity. It did not feel the light at all, so it did not ring, it just kept quietly gathering. The two ingredients therefore leave distinctly different marks in the ripple pattern. When we measure that pattern with real precision and ask what mix of ingredients could possibly produce it, the answer that comes back is unambiguous. The matter that only feels gravity far outweighs the matter that ever felt the light. So the case for the unseen does not rest only on galaxies spinning, or light bending around clusters, or matter parting in one distant wreck. It is written, completely independently of all of those, into the oldest light in existence, set there when the universe was very young, carried gently and unbroken across the entire age of everything, and arriving now, this faint, from every direction in the sky, saying, in numbers, with very little room left to argue, the same thing the galaxies have been saying all along. Most of the matter has never shone, and it was already most of the matter before there was any light to shine. There is something worth keeping in the fact that the first light ever set free is also the clearest witness we have to the thing that does not shine. The oldest message in existence is, in part, a message about the dark, written by the dark's effect on everything it would not touch, and still arriving tonight, faintly, from every direction you are not looking. It does not gather into pebbles or planets or anything you could stand on. Ordinary matter has a remarkable talent for getting specific. It collapses. It cools. Gravity gathers a diffuse cloud, and because that cloud can shed heat by glowing, by radiating its energy away as light. It can keep falling further and further inward, growing denser and denser until it becomes a clump, then a rock, then a planet, then a star, something with a surface, an edge, a definite here, a place a foot could in principle come down. The ability to lose heat is the secret ingredient. It is what lets matter commit to a location. Dark matter, as far as everything we can tell goes, cannot do that last and crucial part. It feels gravity perfectly well, so it does gather. It falls inward toward the centers of its basins, like everything else. But it has almost no way to shed heat. It does not glow, so it cannot radiate away the energy of its own motion. So, when a clump of it falls inward, it just speeds up on the way down and sails straight back out the other side, again and again, swinging through the center and out and back, never settling, never able to lose the energy it would need to lose in order to compact into anything small and dense and final. It can build an enormous, diffuse, swarming cloud. It cannot build a stone. It cannot commit to a place. So the dark matter of our own galaxy is not lurking somewhere as a few enormous, dense, secret bodies waiting to be found. It is spread through the entire halo as a vast, thin, smooth cloud, densest toward the center and thinning gently outward in every direction, with no surface anywhere in it, no edge, no grain, nothing in it solid enough to ever land on or stand upon or strike a flag into. It is structure without solidity. It is mass without anything you could honestly call a thing. This is part of why it is so genuinely hard to picture, and it would be a small lie to pretend the picture comes easily once explained. All of our intuition equates a great deal of mass with something big and dense sitting in a particular place. A mountain, a planet, a star. Here is the largest mass there is, and it makes nothing dense, nothing placed, nothing with a here distinct from a there. It is mass that stayed a haze and could never stop being a haze, no matter how much of it gathered. It is the heaviest fog the universe contains, by far, and it never, anywhere, for all its weight, becomes the ground you could rest on. The ground you do rest on tonight, the floor and the planet under it, is made of the rare kind that could lose its heat and commit to a place. You sleep on the exception. The rule is all around the exception, weightier and vaster, and you could not stand on a single grain of it, because it never agreed to become a grain. Every galaxy you will ever see is sitting in one of these. Look at any photograph of a galaxy, the great spiral of Andromeda, a bright pinwheel seen face on, a faint smudge dredged out of a long, deep field exposure, anything at all. Whatever it is you are looking at the lit center of a dark sphere. And the dark sphere, not the lit center, is the larger fact every single time without a known exception worth the name. This is not a special local quirk of our own galaxy that we have unfairly generalized. As best we can tell, it is simply what a galaxy is. The bright pattern you can photograph, the disk, the arms, the glowing crowded core, sits inside a far larger, roughly spherical halo of unseen mass that contains most of the total. The proportion holds from the nearest large spiral to the faintest, most distant smudge the deepest telescopes can pull out of the dark with the longest exposures we know how to take. The light is always the inner kernel. The dark is always the surrounding body. The picture is the exception in the object, not the rule of it. So when you let your eye sweep slowly across one of those long exposure images and try to count what looks like thousands upon thousands of galaxies scattered across the black, you are also, without seeing it and without any way to see it, looking at thousands upon thousands of invisible spheres, packed and strung along the threads of the cosmic web, each one larger than the bright thing announcing its position, each one touching in its faint outermost reaches, the faint outer reaches of its neighbors. The visible universe, the one we photograph and crop and frame and hang on walls and call beautiful, which it is, is a field of bright kernels suspended in a far vaster, fully connected field of dark bodies that we have agreed, only because we have no other choice, to draw as empty black space. There is no need to make that uncanny, although it genuinely is, and the uncanniness does not require any decoration to be felt. It is simply the correction the evidence keeps asking us to make, quietly, every single time we look up at a clear sky or a deep image. The galaxies are not lonely islands of mass floating in a true void between them. They are the glowing centers of dark masses that reach out and touch the dark masses around them. A universe far more connected, through the part we cannot see, than all the wide black gaps between the visible lights ever led us to believe. The gaps were never gaps. They were the parts of the connection we had no organ for. Every photograph of the night that looks mostly empty is, read correctly, a photograph of something almost everywhere touching something else, with a few bright places marking where the touching happened to catch fire. The emptiness in the picture was always our emptiness, not the universe's. A gap in the seeing, never a gap in the thing seen. We are the rare exception, not the rule. We tend to assume, almost without ever putting it into words, that we are made of the normal stuff, the default stuff, the ordinary kind of matter, with the exotic kind being the strange minority lurking somewhere out at the edges of things, a footnote to a universe mostly made of atoms like us. It is in every measurable sense the other way around. By mass, the ordinary matter, the kind that forms atoms, the kind that builds stars and oceans and stone and bone, the kind that is currently arranged into this voice and into the ears it is reaching and into the quiet room around you, is the small fraction. It is only a sixth or so of all the matter there is. The unseen kind is the rest, the great remainder. Atoms are not the substance of the universe. They are the trace element in it. We are not the sea, and we never were. We are the rare, bright bloom on the surface of a sea that has no color. The unusual case, the matter that happened to be able to shine, which it turns out is the strange and uncommon talent, not the normal one. The ability to glow is the exception. The inability to glow is the rule. This is worth letting land fully, without softening it on the way down, because the first instinct is to find it lonely, and it does not have to be made cheerful in order to be made bearable. Everything that has ever mattered to you, everyone you have loved, every face you can call up in the dark, every place that felt like yours, is built entirely from the exceptional minority of matter, the kind that can clump, can cool, can lose its heat and commit to a place, can become a planet, and then, given enough time, a creature, and then a thought, and then a creature lying awake, wondering about all the rest of the matter that never did and never could do any of that. The dominant kind does none of it. It cannot. The whole capacity to become something, to gather, to settle, to ignite, to organize itself eventually into a being that asks questions about the universe it is a tiny part of, belongs almost entirely to the rare kind, the minority kind, your kind. So you are not made of the universe's main ingredient. You are made of its rarest one. That is not a smallness, and it is not a grandeur either. It is just not at all what we assumed. And the assuming, it turns out, was always the only comfortable part of it. To be made of the rare kind is to be made of the only kind that could ever have come to know there was a rule it was the exception to. The dark cannot wonder what it is. You can wonder what the dark is. That asymmetry is not a consolation exactly. It is just the strangest and most specific thing the rare matter ever learned to do. One detector listened for 30 years, and the silence held. There is a particular discipline carried by an experiment that runs longer than a career, and it is worth standing inside it for a moment rather than walking quickly past it on the way to the result. Because the standing inside is the truer thing. Some of the great underground searches have been running across successive generations of larger and colder and quieter tanks, for spans of time that exceed the entire working life of a single physicist. People have entered this field as students, given it all their best decades, trained the students who would replace them, grown old and retired. And across all of that, the central event the whole apparatus was built to catch has not unambiguously arrived. The detector kept watching after each of them stopped. It is watching right now, tonight, while this is being said, and while you are lying here, under its mountain, in its dark, holding its still attention. Hold both halves of that at once, because the subject is dishonest if you only hold one. The work was not wasted. Every quiet year narrowed the possibilities, ruled out whole families of candidate particles, told us with steadily increasing precision what the thing is not, where it cannot be hiding, how faint its touch would have to be if it touches at all. That is real, hard-won, durable knowledge, and it does not feel like nothing to the people who spent their lives building it, even on the year when the answer is, once again, no clear touch. But it would be a small dishonesty to dress that long silence up as a triumph. The flicker they hollowed out mountains and chilled oceans of liquid to hear has not clearly come. Whole human spans of patience have been spent leaning toward a sound that has, so far, not been made. There is no resolution to offer at the end of this, and inventing one to round it off gently would be a way of lying to you in the dark. Somewhere under a mountain tonight, a cold, sealed, perfectly shielded volume is holding more still than any person could ever manage to hold, attending to the dark with a steadiness no human attention can match, waiting for a tap that may come tomorrow, or in 50 years, or never at all. The people who first began that vigil may not be there for its end, whenever or whatever its end turns out to be. The vigil does not need them to be there. It simply continues, quiet, patient, unrewarded so far, in the dark, where the thing it has been listening for either is, or is not, about to, very softly, arrive. And the detector will not know the difference until it happens, if it happens, and neither will we. That is the actual shape of the patience, not waiting for a known thing on a known night, but holding still for an unknown thing on an unknown one, and counting the holding still itself as the work because it is. We also try to overhear it where it might be destroying itself. There is a second way to look for the unseen, entirely different from the first, and it does not wait under a mountain. It looks up and outward at the crowded places. If dark matter particles can, very rarely, meet one another and annihilate, destroy each other and release energy in the process, then in the densest places in the universe those rare meetings should happen often enough to matter. The crowded centers of galaxies, the hearts of galaxy clusters, the cores of the faint dwarf galaxies that are almost pure dark matter and almost no light. In places like that, the constant rare self-destruction of the stuff might produce a faint, steady excess of very high-energy light or particles streaming outward, a thin glow that no ordinary process happening there could account for. So instead of waiting in stillness for the dark to touch one careful instrument, we point instruments at the places that hold the most of it and listen across the sky for the byproducts of it meeting and unmaking itself. It is a different kind of hope than the buried tank, and the difference is worth feeling. The tank waits, in total silence, for a single private flicker that almost never comes. This second search watches enormous public crowds of the stuff, whole galactic centers, whole clusters, and asks a different question. Is anything coming off them slightly too bright, slightly too energetic, slightly other than the ordinary sky has any right to produce there? Now and then, a faint anomaly does appear in that kind of data, and the field grows briefly, electrically tense, because this time it might be the long-awaited signal. And then, so far, every time, it has turned out to be explainable some duller way, or simply too faint to insist on without fooling ourselves, and the tension settles back down into watchfulness again. We will not round this toward an answer it has not actually given, because the rounding is exactly the error that makes people misunderstand where things stand. Between the silent tank deep under the mountain and the telescope aimed at the blazing galactic crowds, we have built two completely different ways of trying to overhear the same silent thing. One listening downward in stillness for a private touch. One listening upward at the loudest places for a public glow. And so far the thing has kept its silence in both of them equally without preference. That is not precisely a failure. It is the honest present state of an honest search. Two enormous patient instruments pointed in opposite directions, both still waiting for the universe to confirm out loud in some voice we cannot argue with the thing its gravity has been quietly insisting on the entire time. Two instruments, opposite directions, the same patience, the same answer so far. Not yet, not clearly, not in a voice we can keep. And still both of them are listening tonight, because the gravity has never once stopped insisting, and a thing that insists that steadily, for that long, in that many independent voices, is not usually wrong about being there. Two galaxies can merge and their dark halos barely notice. We picture a galaxy collision as a catastrophe, and for the light it very nearly is. But the larger, unseen part of the event is far quieter than any photograph of it could ever suggest, and the quiet is the part worth keeping. When two galaxies merge, the visible drama is real and it is genuine. Vast clouds of gas slam into one another, and the shock ignites sudden bursts of brilliant new stars. The graceful spiral shapes are torn out of true, drawn into long, luminous tails and bridges flung across enormous distances. The orderly disks are wrecked, their patient spin destroyed, their structure scrambled into something that will take an age to settle. From the outside, in the right exposure, it looks like the most violent thing two galaxies can do to each other, and in a sense it is. But the stars themselves almost never actually hit one another. The distances between stars are so unimaginably vast compared to the sizes of the stars themselves, that two entire galaxies worth of stars can pass clean through one another with, in all likelihood, not one single direct collision between two suns in the whole event. And the dark halos, larger than everything visible in either galaxy, the great majority of both objects by mass, simply move through each other. They are slowed only gradually, over a very long time, by the patient pull of their mutual gravity. They never shock. They never pile up. They never form a front where one refuses the other. They just interpenetrate, like two slow weather systems drifting into the same sky, and over a long age they settle, gravitationally, into a single combined halo, with no crash anywhere in the process. So the true scale of the event is mostly serene. The fireworks, the burst of newborn stars, the torn and glowing arms are happening in the thin, bright, exceptional minority of the matter, the part that can shock and ignite and tear. The major component, the two great dark spheres that are most of what each galaxy actually is, are passing slowly and almost silently into each other, agreeing by gravity alone over an enormous span of time to become one. Our own galaxy is on a slow approach toward its large neighbor right now. The two are falling together across a gulf so wide the falling will take longer than the sun has left to shine, and in some far-off age, they will merge. When that happens, long after tonight and long after everyone, the stars will mostly drift past one another untouched, and the two great dark halos will fold quietly together first, and most silently of all. The largest part of the event, as it always is, the part with the very least noise in it. By the time any creature could exist to watch that sky change, the watching would take longer than watching has ever lasted. The merger is not an event in the sense a night is an event. It is closer to a season the galaxy is in, one so slow that the loud, bright, torn-armed part of it would, to anything alive, look perfectly still. The scaffold will outlast every star that ever shines. Let the clock run all the way out, not forward a while, but all the way. Far past the last bright thing, into an age of cinders and slow cold. The long, dark era that physics says is coming, when star formation has ended everywhere, when the last embers of the last stars have faded down toward nothing, when the sky, to any eye that could still exist, has gone almost wholly black. In that age, the cosmic web is still there. The great dark filaments, the deep basins, the knots and the vast empty rooms between them, all sculpted in the first ages before there was any light. None of it fades with the stars, because none of it was ever lit, and none of it ever ran on fuel that could run out. The structure persists, holding its shape into a universe that has gone almost entirely dark to any possible eye. Its threads still thread, its voids still yawn. The architecture is still standing in the dark, long after there is anything left inside it bright enough to draw the architecture by. This is, in a sense, the dark matter's quiet inheritance, and it is worth stating plainly even though it is large. It was first, we have already followed that. It is also very nearly last. The bright era, the age with stars in it, with light and warmth and the brief, improbable possibility of creatures awake enough to lie still and wonder about all of this, is a thin, luminous chapter set between a dark beginning and a dark end, both of which belong completely to the unseen. The scaffold opens the book before there is any light to read it by. The scaffold closes the book after the last light has gone out. The stars and everything the stars allowed are what happens on the lit pages in the narrow middle of it. We will not make that bleak, and we will not pretend it is warm, because it is honestly neither, and the truthful response to it is not consolation and not dread, but something steadier and quieter than either of those. You are awake in the lit chapter. So is everyone you will ever know or have ever known, or could. The pages before this one were dark, and the pages after it will be dark, and the part of the book with reading lamps in it, the part with a sky in it worth lying under, the part with anyone in it to lie there, is exactly the part you happen to have been set down inside. That is not a thing to grieve in the dark tonight. It is, if it is anything, the reason the dark tonight is bearable. You are here for the lit part, and the lit part, right now, around you, is still going on. It has not ended. It is not close to ending. On the scale of the scaffold, it has barely begun, and on the scale of one night, it is simply, plainly, here. The lamp not yet out, the page not yet turned, the dark frame holding the lit chapter open a while longer for everything inside it that can still read. If you could feel it, you would feel nothing at all. Imagine being given, for one single night, a new sense, a nerve tuned precisely to the thing all your other nerves were never built for. A way to register dark matter directly, the way the eye registers light or the skin registers warmth. You lie here in this room, in this bed, and the new sense switches on. What honestly would it report back to you? The honest answer is almost a disappointment, and the disappointment is the entire point of imagining it. It would report a faint, smooth, uniform, directionless presence, very slightly stronger in the direction of the galaxy's center and very slightly weaker away from it, very gently in motion as the whole solar system sails forward through the halo. No texture anywhere, no grain. No edges to run a hand along, no surfaces, no objects, no events. Just a vast, even, almost featureless something, filling the room and the planet and the long reaches between the planets. Exactly as present in this bedroom as in the deepest cave on Earth, as in the gulf between the stars, present in very nearly the way the air is present, except that the air, by comparison with this, is loud and busy and full of incident. There would be no event in it for the new sense to catch hold of, nothing to flinch from, nothing to reach toward, nothing that arrives and then passes and is gone. The most the sense could ever truthfully tell you, all night, no matter how long you lay there listening with it, is that you were immersed, that there was, very quietly, more here than there appeared to be. Everywhere, evenly, and the whole time. Maybe that is the truest single thing to carry down with you towards sleep tonight, and it is worth saying clearly that it is not a comfort and it is not a fear. It is something calmer and plainer than either of those, and steadier for being plain. The largest presence there is would not announce itself even to a sense built for the sole purpose of finding it. It would just be there, the way deep, still water is there around a thing resting in it, not threatening it, not embracing it, not aware of it, simply being the medium it rests in. You have been resting inside this medium your entire life and felt nothing of it, not once. And feeling nothing of it, it turns out, was never the same thing as being alone in it. A thing can hold you without touching you. The deep water does not embrace what floats in it. It simply does not let it fall. You have been held that way your whole life by something you will never feel close, and the not feeling was never abandonment. It was only the particular way this kind of holding is done. Some things hold by pressing back. This one holds by being everywhere you are about to fall, and it has been everywhere you have ever been. We still do not know what most of the universe is made of. It is worth saying the whole thing plainly, once, with nothing draped over it to make it sit easier. We have weighed the universe in many fully independent ways, by galaxies spinning too fast for their light, by light bending around clusters far more than the visible mass could bend it, by matter and light physically parting ways in one distant wreck, by the growth of the entire cosmic web across cosmic time, by the frozen ripples in the oldest light in the sky, by the precise recipe of the lightest elements forged in the first few minutes of everything. Every one of those methods, arrived at separately by different people, using different instruments, leaning on different physics, returns the same verdict. Most of the matter in the universe is something other than the matter we, and everything we have ever touched, are made of. The evidence for that single conclusion is among the strongest evidence there is in any science. And we cannot tell you what it is, not its mass. Not whether it is one kind of thing or a whole hidden family of things. Not whether it was born in the first fraction of the first second or assembled gradually long afterward. Not whether it ever, under any conditions anywhere, touches itself even faintly. We have a name for it that is openly an apology. We have a list of candidates that are honestly just bookmarks. We have two great patient instruments pointed in opposite directions that have so far heard nothing clear from it at all. And there remains a serious minority of careful people who suspect there is no substance there to find, and that it is our own law of gravity that is incomplete. We do not know which of those worlds we are lying in tonight. This is not a gap that some next paragraph quietly closes. There is no reveal being held back for the end. Most of the matter in the entire universe is a thing we are nearly certain exists and cannot identify. And the people who have spent their whole lives on this question would tell you exactly that, in those words, without flinching, because flinching is not a thing this question has ever once rewarded in anyone who works on it honestly. To say it cleanly, most of what holds the universe together is something we can weigh, map, and trace, and cannot yet name or catch or rule in or rule out. They have made their peace with the gap, or have stopped needing to. The not knowing is not a wound they are waiting to have closed. It is the shape of the room they have chosen to work in, and they have furnished it, and they keep the lights on in it, and they go in every morning anyway. That is, in the end, the truest thing this whole night has to offer you. Not an answer, but a way of being calm inside the absence of one. The universe weighed itself for us, honestly, in 6 different hands, and every hand came back saying the same impossible sentence. Most of what is here is something we cannot yet name. And the people who know that best sleep at night anyway. So can you. We still don't know. And tonight, that's where we'll leave it. The unseen was never absence. One last turn, and then we let the dark simply be dark, which is, after all, what it has always been doing anyway, with or without us watching it. We began the night with a word that is almost an apology, dark matter, and the word has been doing it a quiet injustice the entire time. We named it for what our eyes could not do with it, which is the only thing eyes could ever have named it for. But dark to us has always meant lack, the lamp gone out, the room gone empty, the thing that should be there missing, and there is nothing missing here. The halo is not an absence wrapped politely around the bright disk. It is the larger presence the disk was born inside and has lived inside the whole time. The wide black space between the galaxies, which we draw as empty because we have no other way to draw it, is strung, in truth, with the single most abundant thing the universe contains. We have spent this whole long night learning the exact shape of something entirely from everything it moves, and never once from the thing itself. The spin of the outer stars, the bend in the ancient light, the matter parted in the distant wreck, the kink in the shredded stream, the ripple frozen into the very first glow. The universe kept handing us the proof, patiently, in a language made entirely of consequences, from long before there was anyone here to read it, and long before we had built anything able to. Not absence, a presence so complete, so total, so much the greater part of everything, that it never once needed to shine in order to be most of what is. We will keep the name, because names are hard to change once the world has learned them. But you can hear it differently now, lying here. Not dark as in missing. Dark as in the part that was here first and will be here last and has been holding the lit middle, gently the entire time, without once being asked to and without once being seen. Together, we have drifted out through the halo and slowly back, through the basin that was here before the first star, and will still be here after the last one, through the long patience under the mountain, and the long silence that has not yet broken there. We did not solve it. It was never going to be solved tonight, by us, in the dark. And it did not need to be solved for the night to do the only thing the night was ever for. If your eyes feel heavy, let them close. The river is still moving through the room, soundless, indifferent, carrying nothing at all away from you, exactly as it has every night you have ever slept, and every night before there was anyone here to sleep. If this felt like home, leave a comment when you wake up. And if you're still here, the next chapter is waiting. The universe will still be here when you wake up. So will we. Good night.